Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gentle Business Space podcast. I'm Fabi. I'm a nervous system friendly business and systems mentor, and I support other sensitive women build an aligned and sustainable heart-centered business with more clarity and calm and structure so that you can really grow your business without burning out. And today I want to talk about something that we hear a lot in the online space, and it's the idea of having to be consistent to grow your business. And while there's of course truth in consistency helping us build momentum, I think the problem that often comes up is that we're often only showing one version of consistency. And that's a lot of the times posting every single day, showing up consistently and being visible all the time. And that can feel really overwhelming and also create a lot of pressure about how we should be showing up. And I think many of us try to follow that model and then can't keep up and feel really discouraged and then disappear completely for weeks because it feels like we've already failed. I know this has been a cycle for me many times, trying to really be consistency in that constantly being present, constantly sharing online, constantly creating content and being present. And then of course, after a while, that's really hard to keep up with. And then feeling discouraged and feeling like I failed and disappearing and not sharing anything anymore. And I think a lot of us been through a similar process. A lot of us experience something similar. And that's why today I want to really talk about why consistency actually looks really different for each one of us and why it needs to look different depending on our life and our business and our capacity. So we want to take a little bit of that pressure off that a lot of us experience when it comes to consistency of showing up. So when we see other people sharing daily, it's so easy to think that we have to do the same and do it in the same way that they're doing it. But often we forget that we're really just seeing that kind of highlight reel of their life and their business. And we have no idea how much support they have or what their capacity looks like behind the scenes. And when we try to copy someone else's rhythm, we often set ourselves up to fail. So we really push hard for a few days trying to kind of copy that same process and then completely burn ourselves out. And I think what happens then a lot of the times is we start to create content just for the sake of posting without it actually meaning anything or helping our clients. So it becomes this kind of rhythm that we get into. We're just sharing for the sake of it without actually having a connection to it anymore. And it just becomes that cycle of pushing, crashing, disappearing, and feeling guilty. And for me, one example for that was when I tried to create regular blog posts, like a weekly blog post, because that's what a lot of people did. And it's supposed to help your website SEO and just great for sharing. You have some valuable resources because a lot of people did that. So I thought I should do the same. It took me forever to start writing the first one. And then I never continued. Because when I reflected on it, writing isn't, although I like writing shorter posts, for example, but bringing a blog post together in a long form, that isn't my natural way of communicating, of sharing. It doesn't come easy to me. And although not everything has to come easy to us, some things we have to learn, it felt really forced. So I gave that up, and that was okay. And instead I switched to podcasting. I really like to talk. It comes easier to me. So it doesn't feel like a pressure of creating in the first place. And then I can repurpose that and use each episode as a blog post. So it's not my main thing I share, but I still have the resources. I can now still be consistent with creating blog posts. But I'm doing it in a way that really works for me, that feels much more effortless because I'm working with my strength and not against them. So that makes consistency a lot of the times much easier. So there are a few things that really shape what consistency realistically can look like, and I want to have a little look through them today. For one, I think it's important to reflect on your stage of business. When you're just starting out, everything is new. So much things to figure out, and what you want to say and who you're speaking to, and you might change your mind about your offers a lot and who you want to focus on working with, and that's completely normal. But we need to know that it makes consistency much more challenging. So it's then again that idea of maybe showing up very imperfectly and messy, like we talked about in the previous podcast, which is fine, and allowing ourselves to change our mind, and not so much that pressure that consistency needs to look like perfectly showing up every single day, and that things can change over time. So I think that pressure with consistency can sometimes be as well that everything needs to be perfect and I need to know exactly what I'm sharing. It's not going to be that way when you're starting out. It is going to be a little bit messy, and it's going, your rhythms are going to change, what you're sharing is going to change, and that's okay. You're going to experiment, you're going to try out what's working, and then you can figure out, what you're sticking with. And also, you might have more time at the beginning when you're just starting out. You might have more time for content creating, for example. But of course, it's that kind of balance of not quite sure yet what we're actually sharing. And that's okay. And then if you look at later on in business, you might be clearer on what you want to share. But actually now you're focusing a lot on client work. And that's obviously good. That's where you want to be. So you might be much more busy. But have maybe now the kind of sticking point is more the time of actually having time to share in a consistent way because you're so busy with client work, although you're a bit clearer on what you're sharing. So again, your consistency might look different, and it could also be, I think, an advantage of being in business for a bit longer is that you have a lot more content to reuse as well. So it can make that easier if we allow ourselves to make it easier. If you later on in your business, instead of still trying to, reinvent the wheel all the time, you can reuse much more content, which will make it easier if you're very busy with client work and a lot in delivery mode. And then another point I wanted to look at is what kind of business you run and how you get clients, because that again will determine how consistency will show up for you, or what consistency would mean to you. If most of your clients come through SEO, your consistency might more look like keeping your website up to date. So making sure that really works. That would be more your focus in terms of consistency. If your clients come through social media, consistency will be more about showing up on the platforms that feel good to you and in a way that feels right for you. As each platform has different preferences of, how things are being shared. If you don't constantly like to be active or sharing reels or anything like that, maybe Pinterest is good for you because you can create a lot of content from a blog post and share them and schedule them. It's a little bit more passive. It doesn't feel quite so then Facebook and Instagram have kind of more that feel you have to be present and engage with people. So if you don't like that, maybe Pinterest is better for you. And if you really like showing up, connecting with people, then maybe Instagram is better for you. But even within each platform, you can find your own way of sharing that feels right to you. So it doesn't have to be what everyone else is doing. You can experiment, you can try out, notice what's working for you, and then do more of that. And if you rely more on referrals, then your consistency might look like really nurturing relationships with people and really focusing on how can you do that in a consistent way to continuously get referrals. It really depends on what works for you and your business and not what works for everyone else. So just because somebody else posts every single day on social media, that doesn't mean that will work for you. Or that's what is even needed for your business and your type of business and the way you work. And then the next point for me, and that's a really important one, is capacity. This is like my main point, really. because capacity looks so different for all of us, and depending on your client load, your life commitments, your mental health, physical health as well, your family life and your energy levels, it will really depend how much capacity you have to show up and share and be consistent. And many people will show up daily because they have support. They might have a VA, they might have social media managers, they might have support at home. So that all helps, having that support structure to be consistent. But we compare ourselves to that and think we have to do the same. And that's when it can be really difficult to really allow ourselves to step back and actually really evaluate where are you within your business and your stage of business, and what is realistic within your capacity. And often that is going to be less, and that's okay. If you're really in that delivery mode of a lot of client work, plus doing all your admin, running the back end, plus your life, and trying to show up consistently, of course, it is going to come to a point where that feels a lot and sometimes too much. So we have to come back to that point that your capacity really determines what's sustainable and what's not. And it's really important to be compassionate with yourself about that. And know it's difficult, and I know it's hard to say, I am going to share less because otherwise I'm going to be overwhelmed, and I'm okay with that. But I'm going to focus on what's really working. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see what's working. I'm going to stick with less instead of overwhelming myself. And there's a few ways we can create more of that sustainable consistency. And I think an important one here first is to decide what consistency means for you. And I think that's really important and kind of touches on all the points that we just spoke about. So what consistency means to you is very different what it means to somebody else. Again, it depends on capacity. Does somebody have support on your business, your stage of business, all of these kind of things. So it might be posting 3 times a week. Maybe it is posting every single day of the week if you have the time and it's joyful and you like it. Maybe it's just posting twice a week. It might be 1 blog post a month. Maybe it's weekly blog posts because that's really working for you, but maybe it's just once a month. It might be a newsletter every 2 weeks. And it doesn't have to be everything. Choose what's working for you, what comes easy to you, what you enjoy, and then commit to that in a very gentle, compassionate way. For me, for example, it's coming back to that example with the blog post and the podcast. Doing a weekly podcast just wouldn't have fit my capacity. And that was really hard to decide because I know the common thing is to do a weekly podcast. But I knew it didn't fit my capacity. I've had too much when I started this. I had way too much delivery of client work that it wouldn't have worked to make the time to record, edit, and share on social media a podcast every single week. It wouldn't have worked, and I know I would have started it with lots of energy and then I would have crashed and probably not done it at all, or constantly feel bad because I'm missing one. So instead I decided to go for a 2-week rhythm. It was a bit scary because it wasn't what's kind of commonly done, but it works for me. It allows me time to edit, to record, to share. Actually allows me more time to share more on social media to really make the most of it. Plus, it allows me then to have time to make it into a blog post afterwards. So I'm really making more of what little I can create and really stretching it out. It's a great way of being consistent without constantly creating new things. And that kind of brings me to the next point of really choosing what is actually realistic for you. Not what you wish you could do and not what you think you should do, but what is actually sustainable with your current commitments. And yes, sometimes we want to challenge ourselves to, do just a little bit more, or really to commit to showing up in a certain way. And we can do that, but we have to do it in a way that we can then prepare for it, which I'll go into in a minute. But ultimately, I think it's allowing ourselves to be really honest with where we're at within our business and what we generally have capacity for. If you consistently find yourself in trying to do, I don't know, some form of a weekly post, and you consistently don't do it, then I think it's a good point to reflect on why is that? Why does that keep happening? And maybe it's tweaking something because it's just too much for all the other commitments. Maybe it's changing it slightly. So it's coming back to that podcast example. Yes, the common thing was to do a weekly podcast, but I think I had to be really honest with myself that that wouldn't have fit my capacity and I would have consistently be overwhelmed. So allowing yourself to go with your own rhythm and trusting that it would still work with what you have available, and it can change over time. I think that's really important, because sometimes we think if we come up with this rhythm, we have to stick to that for forever. It can change. Maybe my capacity is going to free up over the next year and I have more time and I want to share more, and I'm going to add more podcasts to it. At the moment, I'm going to leave it at this because it works for me. But we can allow ourselves to keep that door open to change it over time, depending on what's going on within our lives, within our business, and what's needed for our business. And then another point for me is to really focusing on your strengths. This makes it really so much easier to be consistent when we do what we actually want to do and a way that we want to share. Again, I think there's this pressure of other people share this, that's why I should be doing that. And that usually doesn't work because we force ourselves to do something that we don't actually want to do. So really coming back to that question of what comes naturally to you, what you enjoy creating, and how do you enjoy sharing. I'm more of a passive person. I'm not a massive sharing my whole life online person. It just never have been. And I try it sometimes on, on Instagram when I feel like it. But then usually I can't stay consistent without. So stories on Instagram have never really worked for me to constantly share personal stories. So I stopped trying to force myself into that. And again, it's that balance of sometimes we want to try and experiment something new ways of sharing. And that's great. And I think we should do that because otherwise we get stuck as well. But ultimately noticing, is that working for me or is that not working for me long term? So again, finding what's working for you. For me, it was talking. So I love doing the podcast. It used to be videos before. Repurposing that into a blog. And then using the videos to share reels. Again, I wasn't really into creating dancing videos online. And you might not be either, and that's okay. So reuse what you have. If you do videos anyway, then you can use them to create reels. So it can be really easy to then stay consistent because you're not feeling like you're constantly forcing yourself to do something that you don't actually want to do. And in that kind of creating phase, it's all about, I think, making it easier. And I shortly mentioned that before. But how can we make things easier? So can you batch create your content? So it's not on a day-to-day basis that we sit there every single morning. What can I share? Can you batch your content? Can you pre-schedule your content as much as you can? Because again, it doesn't depend on your mood on the day, during the week, your time, if other commitments come up. You prioritize creating your content, you scheduled it, you don't have to think about it anymore. It makes it so much easier to be consistent when things are already created and pre-scheduled. And reuse old posts. You don't constantly have to create new things. What you've shared before is still valuable. People seeing it don't know if you created this post a year ago or now. So allow yourself to reuse old things when you really don't feel like showing up. So it makes it a little bit easier and makes it a little bit easier to have that consistency, even though we don't feel like creating something new. There is content that you can come back to And ultimately, that will take some time to really create the kind of resource bank of content. But allow yourself to reuse. It's fine. And also with that, and I kind of mentioned that with my example of the podcast, it's really using one piece of content in multiple ways. So again, you don't have to create lots of new things all the time. Use one long form content and break it down into little pieces, share it in different forms that feel easy and aligned with who you are and how you want to share. And I think with that, it's really important to be really kind when you miss something. So you might have committed to a 2-weekly blog post, to writing a 2-weekly blog post. But things do happen, and sometimes we don't get to do it. And that's okay. And I think it's important that we're compassionate about that, because, life happens, things come up, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. And then instead of kind of throwing it all overboard, we can maybe have a plan B. So maybe there's an off post, something you can share that doesn't take a lot of effort, or what is one other small thing that you can still share to show up. So instead of that kind of disappearing then for weeks because we haven't done this one post, continue. Just get back to it. Get back to the next post. It's okay when we miss it once or twice or a few times. It's just the consistency. I think a lot of the times it's more about coming back to it when we can't do something. And that does happen. I think it's something to prepare for. I think we prepare for best case scenario. I'm going to commit to this. I'm always going to do this. Realistically, that's not going to happen. Even with the best laid out plans, with batch creating, with replanning, a lot of the times we are one person business with other life commitments, and things are going to get in the way. So how can we meet ourselves when that happens? Can we be compassionate about it? And maybe thinking, okay, what's one small thing I can do? And then getting back to it. Instead of abandoning it, get back to it, whatever you committed to, and just continue. It'll be fine. And then keep reviewing what's working. I think that's really important. So at the beginning I mentioned sometimes you get into that rhythm of just doing things for the sake of doing them. And consistency for me isn't just about doing more. It's doing what's actually moves your business forward, what's really helping you to grow. So try a rhythm, try something, and then stick to it for a while and then review and adjust. If something isn't working, we can adjust it, we can make it meaningful again, so it's really working for you, and really evaluating, is it working for attracting clients, as well as is it working for you in your life. So again, you might have started with a weekly blog post, but if you consistently keep finding yourself not doing that and then feeling bad about it, can you review it and go back to, okay, actually weekly was way too much. Let's try 2 weekly or once a month. So allow yourself to adjust. It's fine. And I think it's important that we keep asking as well those questions of, what does your business actually need right now? Where do you find your clients? And what feels good and sustainable to you? Always coming back to those questions so it doesn't become this rhythm of just doing without really knowing why we're doing it, without meaning. And because your business as well as you change over time, I think it's important that we come back to those questions and really notice, okay, is this what I've done last year still working for me now? Is this still relevant, or do I need to shift and do something else? Does this still work for me and my capacity? Is it still sustainable? Have life circumstances changed? So maybe I need to change and adjust. So I think it's good that we sometimes just come back to those and really reflect on, is it still relevant? So I'd love to invite you to just take a moment to ask yourself, what does consistency really look like for you in this season that you're in with the capacity that you have available? What is realistic? Not what you want to do, but what's realistic for you? And how does that feel in the body? I know for me, it always, although it felt scary, it's also a bit of a relief of, okay, I don't have to be everywhere every single day, and I don't have to do everything. I can focus on what's working for me within my capacity. So I'd love to invite you to just reflect on that. Reminder, it doesn't have to look like anyone else's version of consistency. And when you define your own rhythm, one that really fits your life and your business model and your energy, consistency becomes much more realistic, gentle, and sustainable. It doesn't feel forced anymore when you make it easier and more aligned with who you are. And you stop that cycle of going through burnout and guilt and disappearing, because you're working with yourself and not against it, and you're working with your strengths and how you want to work, and really trusting your own path instead of kind of pushing against it all the time. So if that's something you'd like a little bit more support with, I'd love to invite you to my one-to-one work, where we explore this much more, ways that you can really build on your strength and work consistently without burning out in a really sustainable way, and a way that's aligned to how you want to work. So if you're interested in that support, I invite you to just reach out to me, and I'd love to have a chat. We can see how I could support you. So we're coming to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining. I'd love to know, as always, what's your biggest takeaway? Feel free to comment below. And thank you so much for joining, and I will see you again soon. Take care.